This is the time to stand up now. We can't carry on like this.
Very good afternoon. It is Monday the 27th of June. Extraordinary council meeting is planned in a few hours. The message coming out of the Civic Centre is that a secret entrance via the underground car park has been especially open for councillors so they can avoid people outside. You've heard me right. Councillors are being allowed the opportunity to go into that council meeting via a special back door. Remember, Dirty Harry Caffrell, the council chief executive, has already erected perspex screens that look like something out of a Belfast courtroom. And councillors are now being sneaked in. These are the people that you pay for with your council taxpayers' money, and not only are they being sneaked in, they're being sneaked in early for those who require a meal. Graham Sheldon, the leader of the Conservatives, is currently holidaying in a caravan just over an hour away, refusing to return to the council meeting. That's correct. Your Conservative leader that you pay an extra £15,000 a year on top of his allowance is refusing to drive back an hour or an hour and a half for a meeting to discuss, debate, expose one of the most horrific incidences in this town's history. And the leader of the opposition party is on holiday and cannot be bothered to drive back. I'm already being informed that questions are being refused. That's right, questions are being refused by the council. Questions that were submitted some time ago, people are informed now. The woman in charge of constitutional services at Oldham Council is a lady called Elizabeth Drogan. I named these people because they are the council officers responsible. The borough solicitor is a man called Paul Entwistle. You are being refused to ask questions. You can't ask them yourself. That's been confirmed. The chief executive, who is chairing the meeting by all accounts, this is unprecedented as well. The mayor is too scared to chair the meeting, not scared of taking the £10,000 every year plus whatever bonus you get this time for being mayor for the last how many years he's been a councillor, I don't know what, 10, 12 years. But when the moment of truth emerged, he's too scared to chair the meeting. Chairing the meeting simply meant, never mind. And your questions, you're being prevented from asking your questions. So Dirty Harry Caffrell. And I encourage every other councillor who stands for this town to walk in through the front door also. This is one of the questions that has been refused. Let me read it to you. I think it's important. Despite attempts to deceive the people of Oldham, it has now been forced out that SHABIR AHMED was employed by Oldham Council for 18 years. It has now also been confirmed that as well as having access to vulnerable children and families, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang was also protected from investigation whilst employed by the council. Is Amanda Chadderton, the leader of Oldham Council, prepared to name the Labour Party colleagues sat beside her that knew SHABIR AHMED and therefore would have known he worked for Oldham Council? Name who was the borough solicitor, council chief executive and leader of the council at the time a complaint of abuse against SHABIR AHMED was inexplicably, that's in quotes because that's in the report, was shut down by the council. The people of Oldham have a right to know who exactly was responsible. Reassure us all that the council, either directly via the mayor's office or in any other OMBC linked entity or through any other OMBC linked entity, did not provide SHABIR AHMED with any form of reference or support of any kind once he had been charged. It is time for this Labour Party-run council to be honest with us all. SHABIR AHMED was one of yours and you protected him. That question has been refused by Constitutional Services, I would imagine, Elizabeth Drogan. I doubt she would have been able to refuse that on her own. The Borough Solicitor Paul Entwistle would have been involved, and also Harry Caffrell would have been involved. And Amanda Chadderton, because that's who the question is addressed to. I doubt it that she was not aware. So that's right. They are refusing a public question to do with, asked by a teenager, by the way. This is a teenager who's contacted me. Her question has been refused. A teenager's question, a teenager of this town wanting to know about SHABIR AHMED, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang. These people have refused her question. Pam Byrne is going to be there. Apparently Pam Byrne is leading the Conservatives. This was secretly agreed between Graham Sheldon and Amanda Chadderton. So Pam Byrne, without the consultation of the Oldham Conservatives, by the way, is leading the Conservatives in the council chamber. I look forward to listening to what Pam Byrne has to say. I urge everybody who attends, we are not criminals. We are honest, decent people. We are there to witness. We are there to hold them to account. We are not there to cause any trouble whatsoever, and I will not support anyone who is involved in anything like that. Let me be very clear. We've got it this far because we are law-abiding citizens, and every attempt by them and theirs to shut us down has failed because we are decent citizens, decent human beings. We are not like them and theirs. Thank you. That was a question from an 18-year-old young woman, refused by Elizabeth Drogan, head of constitutional services. Last time I looked, I think her salary was somewhere between £70,000 and £80,000. Those of you who yesterday joined me and listened to that harrowing testimony from Child A. Child A has contacted me this morning. Operation Sherwood has been in contact with her. Before I go into detail, let me explain what Operation Sherwood is. Police launch Operation Sherwood to bring Oldham sex abusers to justice as top boss apologises for failings. My message to those offenders is simple. If you think you've got away with it, you're wrong and we are coming for you. Here we go. A new criminal investigation has been launched to bring sexual abusers of children in Oldham who believe they have gotten away with their crimes to justice. Chief Constable Stephen Watson told a press conference that the aim of the investigation will be to apprehend Oldham-based offenders who have historically preyed upon children. Operation Sherwood, and I don't know who, by the way, is in charge of Operation Sherwood, but that name will come to me sooner or later. The senior police officer in charge of Operation Sherwood. They won't be able to hide that name. Operation Sherwood has contacted Child A. I consider the way and means and what they said to Child A was an attempt to intimidate and threaten her. That is right. Operation Sherwood, a police officer from Operation Sherwood, within 12 hours of her harrowing testimony that she shared last night, has been in contact with her to attempt to intimidate her and threaten her. And let me explain how. Operation Sherwood, and none of this would ever have come out if it hadn't been for us and our very public campaign to hold those to account. We have endured so much, and I'm very clear we will endure 10 times, 100 times as much more, because that testimony on its own yesterday was harrowing. And this is what Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police have been proven to have covered up. Operation Sherwood, a police officer from Operation Sherwood phoned Child A this morning and attempted to scare her. They claimed that as a consequence of her testimony, it might risk any criminal proceedings against those who attacked her. Bullshit. Absolute fabrication lie, and Operation Sherwood had no right to contact her and say that to her. That is not the point of Operation Sherwood, and they had no right to do that. There is nothing disclosed in the testimony from yesterday. There are no names of places or individuals that in any way would put a criminal proceedings to in any way at risk. It is absolutely disgraceful for the police to say this and contact and try and intimidate a young woman whose mental health is appalling at this moment in time. She's attempted suicide twice before. And the first thing Operation Sherwood and Greater Manchester Police do is contact her to threaten her. They also claim, and this is the pressure they have put on her, this is how disgraceful they are. Operation Sherwood is finished before it started. What have you got to say, Amanda Chadderton, to this? What have you got to say, Andy Burnham, Beverly Hughes, the Police and Crime Commissioner? What have you got to say to police officers phoning up victims and threatening them? Not only did they threaten her about her, any criminal proceedings to do with her, but they tried to put on her that any other cases are now at risk because of her speaking to me. We didn't discuss any other cases at all. So for a police officer to even suggest that is outrageous. This is a child, this is a young woman with severe mental health challenges, and the police are now trying to say to her, not only have you risked anything that you might have got in terms of prosecutions, you've risked the potential of prosecutions against other victims. Let that sink into you. A senior police officer has contacted this woman and made those allegations. The only reason she came out and testified, you bent pieces of shit, is because you tried to cover up her testimony, and in that review, you turned up on her doorstep and handed over a letter to say you've used her as a case study. At no point was child A allowed to give her testimony to Andy Burnham's now exposed, corrupt review. If you'd done your jobs properly, if the review team had done their jobs properly, this young woman would not have shared her harrowing testimony with me, asking me to share it on this platform with everyone that listens to us. And the first thing, Stephen Watson's Greater Manchester Police, they don't go after the perpetrators, they go after the victims. Once again, they go after the victims. Once again, they attempt to criminalize the victims. There have been no lessons learnt here. The attempt to criminalize victims of systemic gang rape, where the police, the council, the politicians all failed them, and the first thing you do is you attempt to criminalize a young person. I honestly do not know how these officers sleep at night. And do you know what else they claimed? It'll affect any compensation claim she might have against them. Since when was it for a police officer to determine that? Since when was it for a police officer to determine that? The Chief Constable Stephen Watson now needs to name the officers in charge of Operation Sherwood and dismiss them immediately. They are not capable, they cannot be trusted to put the victims first. They cannot be trusted to put our town's children first. They are still trying to protect themselves. What today was about was because we shamed them yesterday. We shamed what they did. Burnham tried to cover up in his review. Ridgway, the Labour man, former police officer, assisted by Malcolm Newsom, tried to cover it up. And we shamed them. She was a footnote in that review. One sentence, 4 lines. The Chief Constable Stephen Watson now needs to issue a statement reassuring this town that his bent police officers have been removed from this investigation. I didn't honestly think it could get as bad as this. Clearly you watch. Hey GMP, how's Operation Hexagon going? I'll see you in court, you bent pieces of shit. The first thing you and the council did was come after the victims and come after those that spoke out instead of going after the perpetrators. You're a disgrace. You're an absolute disgrace. The most senior police officer in Oldham is going to be at the Civic Centre today. He is involved in this. There is a reason why Greater Manchester Police is in accelerated special measures. There is a reason why it's been proven to have protected paedophiles. Is this what we want here? Do we want to Rotherham? Where 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years later they get away with it and not a single police officer is charged? Or are we going to hold them to account in 5 hours' time? And the only way this ends, the only way this ends for Amanda Chadderton is you either do the right thing or we take you out like we took out Arood Shah and we took out Sean Fielding and we'll take out Jim McMahon and we'll take out Debbie Abrahams. And mark my word, this town has changed. We have awoken and we will not sit by whilst our children are groomed and gang raped and you cover it up. Amanda Chadderton has a choice. I gave Sean Fielding a choice. He refused and emailed me back clearly after having a few drinks on a Friday night, giving it a big talk. Well, your career's now finished, Fielding. There's no coming back for you. Arood Shah had a choice. She stood up and defended her relationship with the getaway driver of an Oldham cop killer instead of distancing herself from him and other dangerous criminals. Amanda Chadderton now has a choice. Confirm how you are appalled at the actions of Operation Sherwood. Share your horror at the testimony of Child A. And confirm that having reviewed all of the evidence that you now have and knowing now knowing what you know, and we all make mistakes. It's what you do after you've made a mistake that determines what sort of person you are. I never judge people by the making of their mistakes. I judge them by what they do after they've made their mistakes. This CSE assurance review is not worth the paper it's written on. It has been designed to protect politicians and agencies from due scrutiny. We've exposed inconsistencies and will continue to do that. You either stand up and say this is wrong and this report is not worth the paper it's written on, and I am writing to the government sharing my concerns of what has now emerged, and I also call for a public inquiry. Amanda Chadderton, in her capacity as leader of Oldham Council, now has two choices. One, call for a public inquiry and write to the government calling for a public inquiry, or continue with this nonsense that this cover-up exercise is fit for purpose. You have a choice, Amanda Chadderton. You have a daughter. What sort of town do you want your daughter to grow up in? This is why I'm here. I have a daughter and she's going to grow up in this town. What sort of town do you want your daughter to grow up in? You have a choice, Amanda, and your political career will be defined by it. Mark my words, your political career will be defined by it. You either continue to cover up and are complicit in what is taking place with this charade of an assurance review, or you step to one side and say no, no more. We need to call the government in. We need a public inquiry. You, Amanda Chadderton, are sat beside people who knew SHABIR AHMED, who covered for SHABIR AHMED. That on its own is a reason for a public inquiry. The most notorious child sex offender ringleader in the country of these rape gangs was secretly employed by your council, and your council inexplicably closed down investigations against him. They gave him a job where his role as a welfare officer included making sure that the welfare needs of his Pakistani clientele from the Pakistani community centre where he set up shop were the same Pakistani community centre that was funded by Oldham Council, by the way, with Oldham councillors and Oldham Council officers on its management committee also. He set up shop there, and the welfare he was looking after was dealing with the perverted needs of his local customers. He had order books in there. Pictures of young women, what time, where, when, how much. That's why we need a public inquiry. And as for the police threatening a victim, Greater Manchester Police threatening a victim, they have learnt absolutely nothing. They have learnt absolutely nothing. And this from Operation Sherwood, the very investigation set up to prove to victims we are not the same police force. Malcolm Newson, the chief report writer, is now not going to be there. He's appearing via video link. That's right. He doesn't even have the decency to turn up and face the council that we elect, the councillors that we elect, or the public in the gallery. He's appearing by video link. That just shows the level of contempt that they all treat us with, because of no other reason than that we are working class. That's it. Vote Labour and keep your gob shut. We all stand by Child A, no matter what threats she receives. And the Chief Constable Stephen Watson now must issue a statement. And if he doesn't, then we know what Operation Sherwood really is about. It's not after going after the perpetrators. Remember, Maggie Oliver made specific reference to whatever operation they came up with last year that's arrested bugger all and convicted bugger all. Amanda Chadderton, your political career will be defined today. You either support a public inquiry and condemn this report as an abuse of power and an attempt to cover up something that is unacceptable, and you stand with us and the people of our town and the children of our town and your daughter and my daughter. You either stand with us or you stand alongside the Labour Party, Jim McMahon, and you, Andy Burnham now, God knows how many police officers and council officers, and you continue to protect paedophiles and those who covered for them. This is where we now are. This is a crossroads for our town. We will not be another Rotherham. We will not be another Rochdale. We will not sit by silently whilst politicians and policy officers and policemen and their friends in the press cover this up and get away with it. I will be there. I hope very much that there are enough of us and we force this town to change direction.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.